Yeah. Yeah.
Welcome back to the Going for Two Live Network. Going for Take Two Live, I suppose, in a sense. This is press coverage. I'm your host, Kyle Senra. Joining me is Dr. James Ferretti and Jamie Perog. Doc, how are you doing again?
Hello again.
Hi. Thanks for joining me on this special episode of press coverage. Jamie, how are you?
I'm doing all right, man. Thanks for having me for a second time today.
Yeah, super excited. Love talking to you guys so much. We'll keep doing it over and over again. Hopefully this time it goes correctly. No streams crash. I won't mess around with anything back here, I promise. Hey, I know that guy. Okay, enough of the deja vu. But yes, this is a different episode of press coverage. It's actually the season 4 finale. And due to be special, I'll actually be the one answering the questions. People will finally get to know a little bit about me. Former guests, Doc and Jamie, both were gracious with their times answering questions about themselves, respectively, and both actually approached me with the idea of wanting to have someone host and ask me the questions. So glad I can actually get both of them on at the same time to do this. So this will be fun, gentlemen.
Great minds think alike, right, Jamie?
Oh yeah, except you're a little bit smarter than me, I think. You're a doctor.
Depends on the subject matter, for sure. I'm sure there's lots of things you know more about than I do. But today, it's not about me. It's not about you. It's an homage to Canada, and more specifically, it's an homage to one of Canada's favorite sons, Mr. Kyle Senra. So I'm going to try to do an introduction for Kyle, but it's only an hour-long show, so bear with me. So Kyle is the regular host of not only this show, press coverage on Going for Two, but is also the co-host of the Monday night pregame show, of which I am a proud former co-host of. The 2-point conversion on Monday nights on Going for Two as well. The Full Press Fantasy Pod, the Full Press Packers Pod, as well as now, the rumor has it, the Sunday morning show on the Going for Two network as well. Is that true, Kyle? Are we breaking news here?
I suppose so. I mean, I told Jeff and I told Jamie. I guess Doc found out too.
Now everybody knows. Now it's
a smart guy, but yeah, everyone will know now that I'll be joining.
It's official. All right, and he's done numerous guest appearances on multiple networks and shows, too many to count, so we won't even try it. Now he's a true student of the game of fantasy football, and anybody that knows Kyle knows that. So not only that, his passion and love for the game, obvious as well. He's one of the player rankers here Going for Two, and he's built some really interesting touchdown efficiency player models, which maybe we'll hear more about today, foreshadowing. And for those of you that know Kyle at all, know how generous he is with his time. And on shows like this one, he goes out of his way to allow guests to shine. And that's why it gives me, and I'm speaking for Jamie as well, us so much pleasure to be able to be here on this special episode when we get to turn the spotlight around on him and learn more about the man himself. So in honor of you, Kyle, I got my mug of Tim Hortons coffee, and this is actually Tim Hortons coffee in here, Canada's favorite, for Canada's favorite son. And if you're all ready, I'm ready to get started here with the first question, Kyle. Unless you have any housekeeping or anything else you want to get to first, we'll let you be the host for just a few more seconds, and then we're taking over. So what do you say? Are you ready?
No, go ahead. Host away.
Right. So, Kyle, let's bring it back to where it all started for you. What are your first sports memories?
So I will mention my parents a few times. They're both super into sports. They actually met. They both went to the same university and were both in the kinesiology program. Both wanted to and became successful and now retired teachers, specifically gym teachers. They both drove them into the field. So met with common passion and lifelong love of sports, which they naturally, I guess I lost the word, but enshrined to my sister and I in terms of you two will play lots of sports. So honestly, my first sports memories were playing. And I remember playing soccer at a really young age, 4 or 5. But the first vivid memory I have actually participating in sports was figure skating. I did 1 or 2 years of figure skating before I got into hockey. So that way, when I was learning hockey, I didn't necessarily need to learn how to skate. I learned how to skate in those formative years in ice dancing, figure skating. I've definitely seen a video.
I have a question. Was this figure skating for figure skating's sake itself, or was this like a preamble for hockey, or like was it meant to transition into that, or were you just doing
I think so.
For the love of the sport?
Yeah, I remember
like Blaze of Glory style.
Yeah.
No, I do remember thinking Yeah, it was just going to be for 1 or 2 years and then go into hockey. But honestly, now that I think back, maybe I should have appreciated it more for what it was. I do remember like the first recital we did. It was had a cowboy hat on. It was like a cowboy western theme for whatever the song was. And yeah, I knew the moves, and you could even see on the video like me pointing to like one of the girls. Oh, this is where you got to go. So apparently, I was okay at it. I'm an okay skater. So then I transitioned into playing a lot of other sports, but figure skating was my actual first sports memory that I can remember.
It's great.
I love that. And you're doing a little choreography at the same time too. So that's not, I would not have guessed that. I would have thought that you would have led, it's such a trope, right? Like Canada hockey and everything. And I know you're a big fan, but would not have guessed ice dancing as the first thing. But so we're learning something already.
So were you doing like those 360 spins and?
Yeah, they're definitely not getting 4-year-olds to do those types of. it's mostly just skate to the spot and like skate together and like almost like synchronized skating like that. That was I think more what the emphasis was, like the fundamentals there. No, you start to jump around a little later when I'm at that point I was playing hockey, and I think the age where body contact comes into play is probably the age where you leave the ice and figure skating.
It's great. So from playing sports at a young age. So how did you get into starting fantasy sports?
It's funny because I feel like a lot of people in the States, it's either baseball or football. Those will be like the first introductions to fantasy sports. You already mentioned it, Doc. You already with the Tim Hortons reference. For those who don't know, Tim Horton was actually a hockey player. I don't know if anyone actually knows that.
I didn't actually know that.
Oh, okay. No, a pretty good defenseman too for the Maple Leafs for a long time. Multiple Stanley Cup winner. Great player, but also founded the Tim Hortons company, donut and coffee shops in and around Toronto, and I think early expansions into the state of New York. I think Doc knows very well.
Yeah. So Jamie, you being in the Cleveland area, are you familiar with Tim Hortons at all? Because I feel like I got a little bit of a sneak peek because I did some work and I lived up in the area like Syracuse and Southern Tier, New York, where like the Tim Hortons, which is like a Canadian like explosive gigantic brand, like kind of infiltrated down into the States for a little while. So it's like I feel like I got like a little bit of a like I don't know if it's a sneak peek or like a premiere exposure to some of Canada's finest. Did that make its way down to like the Cleveland area for you?
No, I might have been too young at the time or not paying attention. But yeah, I have no idea.
You might have been too young. How old do you think I am?
Well, I mean, to be fair, like there's there's still Tim Hortons restaurants. Like so there's no Tim Hortons in Ohio, or at least not.
I've never heard of Tim Horton. The only Horton I know is the Horton Here's a Who.
also a fine Horton. Now, the coffee's not as good in those stories.
Nathan Horton was also a hockey player, if I'm not mistaken. More recently, like I think he played for the Bruins. Funny enough, but yeah, so I guess a long way to say my answer actually does revolve around hockey. My parents, I remember doing hockey pools with them where we would pick, and I still recently years done this, but we draft players for the playoffs. So playoffs in hockey typically go from April to June. It's 4 rounds. Cutting the field down in each of the 4 rounds. And we typically do pools where it's okay. We draft a team, 12, 15 players, whatever it is, before the playoffs. And whatever you draft, it's almost like a best ball style. Whoever you draft is your team. Whoever's the most points at the end of the playoffs wins. So no roster management. But the idea was there was strategy behind. Okay, I know there's only 2 teams make it to the final. Do I try and overload on those 2 teams, and if I get it right, I win? Or do I try and spread out the exposure? So the strategy of how are you going for best players or teams you think will advance in that balance? Because you are drafting, so even if you want to go after a certain team, other people might not let you in the draft. So just it was something fun that my parents, my sister, and I would do together every year for a while. So I'd say I've definitely been playing fantasy sports since the late 90s. I think 97 or I'm going to say 98 was the first year we did it as a family. So fantasy hockey pools, that's where it all began. And then a little later with fantasy football.
So how good, when you were going up against your family, would you say that you were the best from an early age, or did you have to kind of grow into it? Were they really stiff competition, or you could already see like at a young age, you're using your analytical mind against them, and I could see like the genesis of where it developed. So how good were they?
Yeah, I would always try and figure out, again, that balance of, okay, good players I want with the points versus the teams I think would go far. So I'd try and predict that. But I would say like all 4 of us pretty balanced would win every so often. Like it didn't feel like one person really dominated. It would be
So the
maybe
Senra
someone wins
family-
2 years in a row, but then it would balance out. I feel like my mom is pretty good at like hockey pools, golf pools. I still do like Stanley Cup series, like the teams, like pick the teams through the series. And just this past year, my mom did super well in it. So she's pretty good.
All the Senras are tough competition.
So back then, did you guys like sit around as a family looking at the newspaper, getting all the scores?
That is, yeah, those first few years was getting the point scores from the newspaper, which is a lot easier for fantasy hockey when you're just counting points. Like it's super easy to do with football, having to convert all the yards and touchdowns. Like that one I could see like being a nightmare. But for hockey, it's pretty simple, especially since we kept it simple. It was just 1 point for every points. If a goalie got a shutout, they got 5 points. So it was fairly easy to track. So yeah, I could do it pretty easily. And like honestly, we would at the end of the year, paper would print usually the Toronto Star, as the big newspaper we get in everywhere in Ontario. Apparently, they would print out every team, like all the points from every team, like every player on every team, how many points they got, and all the stats. So we would use those as the like sheets to draft from because there was no like ADP thing. We weren't doing this on Sleep or anything. It was all just manual. So that's what we'd kind of use, and then look at the paper every day after the games, and that's where we get the points from.
So at what point did you find your way to fantasy football?
Well, it's funny because it's actually it'll enter into the next question, but I'll I guess the next question has multiple answers. So I'll start with the first answer. My first job was working at our local golf course in Elliott Lake, which is called Stone Ridge, and I worked there for 9 years. And typically a golf course maintenance worker, so cutting grass, raking bunkers, weed whacking in the bush, all the sort of things that go with course maintenance. Filling cart path divots, all sorts of fun stuff. Aerating when it's time of year. Did 9 years of that, and the shift is typically like 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. kind of thing. Weekends are usually short though. It's like 6 a.m. to maybe 10 a.m. So after a weekend shift, we usually go out for breakfast. And a couple guys were talking about their fantasy football league, and actually I think they were talking about the league as well, which was very popular. It was 2012 because they had mentioned a couple of my coworkers that they were thinking of starting a fantasy football league, and I indicated my interest. And sure enough, I actually made it to the final that year in that very first league. So immediate success got me the bug. Loved the idea of drafting the team, but the roster management through the year. I remember picking up Russell Wilson as a rookie, and it was I think this was a advanced format because we did use 2 quarterbacks right from the get-go. So rookie Russell Wilson was a late season pickup, and the end of his rookie year actually was pretty good for fantasy. So sometimes like just those things was, found that guy on the waivers, and super fun to me.
That's it. It set the hook. Now I know you had Joe Pisapia on recently. You guys were talking about movies, and I'm just I'm not a movie expert, but if anybody out there is watching and they haven't come up with the idea of Kyle as like a fictional biopic, as like a prequel to like the Carl Spackler character from Caddyshack, like working on the golf course, like that, you're just not trying hard enough. Because it's like I could see it, I could see it, and I don't know. I think there might be some gold there.
You can, it's great. Whatever materials you use, you go play a round of 18 off it, then you roll it up and smoke it in your joint after. It's perfect.
It's a mix of Kentucky bluegrass and featherbed bent. It's Kyle Senra bent, and then you can get high to the bejesus belt off of it after you play 18 holes on it. But this is a family show, so we're
Bill
gonna
Murray,
move on.
quite the hero.
we're gonna move on. So you work as a teacher now, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay,
yes.
What subject?
Well, typically music teach.
Music.
Teaching music is the one I like to do when I'm.
Okay, we're gonna get back to that.
Yeah,
we're gonna get back to that because that is certainly an important job. But we mentioned the golf course. We know you're a teacher now. What other jobs outside of the 17 or so that you have now in the fantasy football space have you had?
Well, actually, when I was in high school, I did work as a basketball referee. So, I'd be do some league games, some high school tournaments as well, male and female. So I definitely remember I guess it's not really provincial champions, but our Northern Ontario Championship girls grade 9 tournament. I definitely remember reffing that as one of more important tournaments and games I was
Nice.
given responsibility of. So yeah, I refed basketball. I guess technically I'm a writer and a podcaster for going for two and full press coverage, the league winners and fantasy six pack. I guess that one will be upcoming this season. But yeah, and then I also am a musician. I've got a band and we have a studio, so those are technically other sources of income. But yeah, I guess official jobs is really just golf course maintenance worker and then right to teaching. Because the last year I did golf course maintenance was 2015, and that's the year I got my full teaching license, where I graduated and then did my year of teachers college. So I think the last shift I did working at a golf course was like September 2015, and then I think my first supply day was like late October 2015. So.
All right. Well, I want to come back more to the music, but I think we'll get there soon enough. So we'll kick it over to Jamie for the next question. I just have one question for you. Now, when you were refereeing these games, I noticed that you, like myself, even though I'm not wearing them now, wear glasses. Now, were you wearing glasses as a referee when you were refereeing those games? Because that is bold. If you were to do that, I have a whole new level of respect for it.
Yeah, I definitely did.
Wearing glasses. Like you have my.
I had to because I couldn't see. I wouldn't be able to see anything to actually make calls otherwise. So I definitely would have. Yeah.
That
I would say I think
you have my undying respect, Kyle.
It's funny because I've been wearing glasses since I was 4. I had actually had like eye surgery when I was 4 or 5, and I've been wearing glasses since then. Then my eyes actually improved and got better. I think it was like grade 6. I actually didn't need glasses anymore, and there was like a 4 or 5 year period where I didn't wear glasses. I think that might have been when I started reffing. So I think I might have done like a year before the glasses, and then suddenly the spectacles came back on. I returned to my 4 eyes mode, and I've learned ever since.
I thought Kyle was trying to be like the cool kids now, where they have the glasses with like the clear lenses that don't actually like have any
no lens,
medical.
just,
yeah,
exactly. or it's just like a fake thing. Like there's no prescription. No, definitely need these to see. Not legally allowed to drive or ref a basketball game without.
I'm very old, Jamie. So let's kick it to you, young man. Go hit him with the next question.
I mean, we're just scratching the surface of Kyle's life so far right now. It's already interesting, but I want to know, what are some of your who's some of your biggest influences you had in your life so far?
So both my parents were teachers, so they were certainly a big influence for my sister and I, because my sister's also a teacher, so whole family teaching, sharing knowledge. But just their love of sports. Both my parents, Augustino Senra and Nicole Senra. Just to show the Agostino Senra, the Portuguese influence, and then Nicole Lafontaine, the French influence. So there you go. All the cultural references have been made. But yeah, they both absolutely love sports. I mean, just the fact that they're such huge golfers is what led me going to the golf course so much, and getting a relationship with some of the pros there. And I actually started volunteering at the course with the maintenance side before I got the job. But I guess I was doing so well at the volunteering once or twice a week that the greenskeeper wanted to bring me on full time. So that they helped like that just directly that way. But just getting into all the different sports. Like my dad played basketball in high school. He reffed as well, actually. Both my parents curled, so that got me into curling, which is the sport I still practice now. Like I mentioned, soccer, hockey. It's funny, I never played football. Like maybe like backyard friends randomly here or there, but like never organized game of football in my life. So I would have no idea what to do. But I certainly love watching it. Maybe that's why, because like to me, it's almost exotic watching football players play, because I couldn't even fathom myself doing it. Like I watched Steph Curry play, and yeah, I understand. There's no way I would ever be anywhere close to as good as him, but I can like understand how he's as good as he is. Like I can like in the realm where I shot enough basketballs, I could see how I could be as good as Steph Curry. But like for any football player, I couldn't even imagine myself doing anything any football player does in the field. And I think that might be why I love watching it so much, is because I never played it. I still love playing basketball. I probably love it more than watching. I do like playing hockey, but man, that is so violent. Like I'd much rather watch it, because like I'll let those guys put themselves through that. Hockey's fun, but like, so it's I think football is weird like that, because I never played it. I love watching it so much, and that's why I'm here talking with you guys.
Well, let's keep, you mentioned some more hobbies there, so let's keep going with that. I want to talk about the music part, so I hope you get into that a little bit more. But tell us more about some of your favorite hobbies now. You listed a bunch, but what are the ones that you really get the most enjoyment out of today?
So I guess there'll be, the end of the episode. Spoiler is the high five section. So I'll be talking about different things I like from that. So you'll gain some hobbies from there. But so aside from them, and hello, Brian. Hey, I know him too. Oh, actually, just looking at the chat.
Mr. New Jersey himself, Brian Ford, in the chat.
More glasses power, yay! Apparently, Kyle Keish is saying there's a couple of Tim Hortons in Michigan. So
see, Kyle knows what's up.
The Canadian invasion is beginning. No, it feels like it's not like anything authentically Canadian. It's just their particular brand of coffee and donuts. Like it's not anything like super. I mean, my favorite donut from Tim Hortons is the Canadian maple, which is like a Boston cream, except instead of chocolate on top, it's maple, and the filling is typically like a maple cream instead of just Boston.
This is the stuff that you can't get. This is the stuff that you can't get on a regular episode. Kyle's he's giving us the goods here.
Sure, I don't know if you've had occasional Canadian guests on the show, but yeah, I guess not too often. So many fantasy football people. I guess one of my favorite hobbies is just games, and that's why I love fantasy football so much. But I've been playing chess since a very young age. My dad, again, big influence in my life. My father, he taught me how to play chess, and I love doing it now, even with my wife. Like I know I was late one time talking to Jamie because I was too busy playing chess with my wife, which is not how Jamie interpreted that message.
I thought you were playing with her chest.
Can't blame me for that, thinking that either. But yeah, so I love chess.
That's what they call it in the Senra out there. They're playing chess. Is that what they call it?
We had an epic game last night where it felt like neither of us made mistakes. We both had like super difficult decisions that we had to make, and like each one of those like 3 or 4 key decisions totally changed the outlook of the game. It was awesome. I ended up winning, which is also made it awesome. Keeping score. But yeah, love games, love card games, whether that's like with playing cards, whether it's euchre or poker or crazy eights, go fish.
Yeah, sorry? That's my favorite game. High stakes go fish. Yeah, I play with my kids all the time.
Is it strip go fish?
No, it's with my kids. High stakes.
Oh, okay. I would imagine
those and Fruit Loops.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Got a bit on those Fruit Loops. Do you know what euchre is or play euchre?
I do not. I do not.
Interesting. Okay, cool. But anyway, that's a game I actually learned how to play at university. And apparently, my wife Victoria, that's how her parents met. They met when they were both going to someone's house to play euchre. That was the first time either of them had met. And they gave birth to my wife, who's like my favorite person in the world. So thankfully, euchre exists.
We're getting the genesis of the whole story. Victoria's parents meet. They play euchre, and then we have Victoria, Mrs. Kyle Senra.
Hello. So I love playing games, but yeah, I love music. I remember the Backstreet Boys were like my favorite thing ever. Super young, just love. Like I remember even playing hockey, where our I guess right around 1999, 2000, 2001, where our like hockey anthems were typically like the Backstreet Boys songs. That's like the millennium. We definitely listened to that in the dressing room a ton. We were sponsored by Auto Pro, so actually our team like not mascot, but our team like theme song was actually "Who Let the Dogs Out." We would change it to "Who Let the Pros Out." Who. So just I have like tons of memories associated to music growing up, and then I remember learning to play guitar in high school. Just loving both the bass guitar and the electric guitar, and just starting to really fall in love with rock bands at that time too. So 2004 was kind of when my Kyle the Rocker phase started, we'll say.
Nice. I hope we're gonna hear more about that sooner rather than later.
Funny because when you said euchre, that's the name that popped into my head.
Yeah, it's definitely spelled differently. It's like EUCHUR. It's like it's almost spelled like euchre. Yeah, it's funny because you don't use a lot of the cards. You take out like everything below a 9. So you keep the aces. So you take out the 2s through 8s, and it's a game of follow suit. So there's one of the 4 suits is named on every turn. The rest of the cards are divvied out, but not every card is given. There will be some cards that are kind of hidden and not used in a round, so there's sort of a mystery on what's there. One suit is named like the Trump suit that, you play this suit, it beats everything else, and that kind of changes per round. So it's also done in partners, which is interesting. Like, it's
I gotta know, is this a Canadian card game, or is this like?
See, I didn't think it was
North America. Let us know in the comments if there are other people in North America and the States that have heard of this and have played this game. Then let us know. I'm curious if it's just north of the border or if it's kind of everywhere and I just missed it.
Yeah, I'll look it up, but I thought it was I don't know. I thought it was like a older game. Commonly played, I guess it's a Commonwealth game. Commonly played in Australia, Canada, Great Britain, and New Zealand. So I'll ask Dan about euchre, actually. So maybe tune into the Full Press, or sorry, not the Full Press, Going for 2 live on Monday, the first game of the season. I'll try and remember to ask Dan about euchre. And Midwestern United States. So I guess Canton and Cleveland are
closest to Jamie, although not really.
Apparently, it's been the earliest surviving rules were published in America by Thomas Matthews in 1844.
So is it like a game like Spades, like Brian's asking? And I don't know what Bridge is. So.
I've heard of Bridge. I don't think it's quite like Bridge. See, it's funny because I know there's a game called Hearts.
Yeah, Hearts and Spades are similar.
So yeah, euchre is similar to them.
Mm-hmm.
The cards are ordered and like, okay, yeah, this card will beat that one, but then again, there's a Trump suit that will kind of beat everything. And yeah.
So you can tell why Kyle is so good at all these contract leagues and things like that, because him just explaining euchre is like, I went to medical school and like my head hurts and I'm just like I can't do it. I was like, if I ever played Kyle, he would destroy me. So it's
unless we're on the same team, then we work together to hopefully.
Yeah, I would have to be, because I'd be like, listen, I'm just I'm an empty vessel here. Just I'm completely out of my element here.
Victoria's parents are really good at euchre. So
I just imagine the holidays in the Senra household. Things probably get pretty wild.
You say Watton Senras are wild and crazy. So like, I guess so. Yeah, were there any music things you wanted to know, Doc?
I think we'll get there.
Right,
but tell us, Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, we've been learning a lot about Kyle so far. So besides all the Backstreet Boys posters on your wall, what's one thing?
It's funny. I was never a big poster guy. Like I remember in university, I started buying posters.
Toys,
but then like it was more, you know what though? Yeah, merchandise like books and like I had all their CDs from their original run, so all their first 4 CDs.
But what we want to know is what's one thing that nobody in this fantasy community knows about you?
So, playing cards aren't the only type of card games I like. I'm a big fan of collectible cards. So I think especially nowadays, like when I was growing up, the popular ones were Pokemon cards. Although none of us ever really played. The game was it's kind of fun, but there are other variants of what I now see are essentially the same game, but just with different collections. So I know it's the idea of these cards are you can collect them, but there's also a game to play with them. So there's sort of the appeal is both, like whether you're a collector or a gamer, you can enjoy these cards. So Pokemon was huge, and I mean when Digimon came out, that was huge as well. I don't know, Doc, you know what I'm talking about? But
I know what you're talking about. Yes,
Jamie.
I know of them. Like my 5-year-old collects Pokemon cards.
Okay.
So
I was once a 5-year-old collecting Pokemon cards too. But then there was Yu-Gi-Oh came out, so Duel Monsters, which is actually I think that was actually a card game first. Then it was based off a comic. Then they made a card game, and then they made the TV show to popularize it. So I collected those as well. But I would say the best one is Magic the Gathering, and that's sort of what I now see is all these games.
Now you're bringing back memories. I think the difference is when did you start playing Magic?
Yeah, I started playing Magic when I went to university. So around the same time I learned to play euchre. So I'm going to say 2010, 2011.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm just having this vision because you started playing fantasy right around like 1997, 1998.
Yeah.
Which is right around the same time that I started It was like 96, 97. I think the only difference is you were like 8, right?
I think 98. I was 7 when I joined my
Okay,
first.
I was close. So you were 7 and I was in college. So that's the difference. So that's
again,
what I
different sport
appreciate.
because I was playing fantasy hockey. So yeah, but like that was the era where I was collecting Pokemon cards. Soon, eventually, Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Got a lot of those. The Magic the Gathering thing came later, and I later realized, oh man, this was the fun one. But certainly, all those like Japanese anime show, Pokemon, Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and of course Dragon Ball Z, and that's the one that Dragon Ball Z is tons of stuff, but like they had their own card game. Like you got the light's gonna suck.
Yeah, we
could
could
have the
So
character.
do you still play that today?
I've got a couple decks. I haven't played in a while, mostly because I don't know anyone else who collects them. But
they're out there, they're now that this show goes out, they're going to be looking for you.
So there's 2.
They're going to want to beat the rise to the challenge.
There's a Gohan deck, orange style, and then there's a Trunk deck, which is no style, but it's some pretty stylish cards. But yeah, I find it to be funner than all those other games, like at least the Japanese ones based on Magic. Again, I still think Magic the Gathering is the funnest of all these. It feels like the other games, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Digimon, they all took a little bit different aspects of Magic, and these ones are kind of like completely different. It's using the power levels on those personality cards. Actually, I have an idea. Will this work? I'll turn this light on. Will that give less glare or give more glare? Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah, Magic's been around for a long time. Because I remember.
Since almost as old as me. I think like the early '90s for sure.
Yeah,
I remember
late
seeing
90s
people play in like the mid '90s.
I would go to the comic book store, and people would be having tournaments, and I didn't know what it was, but people really got into it. So I appreciated it from that point on. I just never played it.
I gotta say, a couple of years ago, Scott Fishbowl, the year it was toys, there was a Magic the Gathering division, and someone from that division actually their entire draft, they were making Magic cards based on the players that they were.
Oh my god!
Oh wow,
that is dedication right there.
Yes, I followed that person's account. It looks like they do like make pretend Magic cards, like they'll take artwork and like create their own Magic cards off it. So it seems like that's something they do anyway, but they totally incorporate that in, and I was impressed and sold, and yeah, super fun.
I actually knew somebody in college who failed out freshman year because of Magic the Gathering, because all he did was stay up all day and all night, and there was always a game going, and he was always playing, and next thing you know, 3 months later, it's like, hey, where did he go? It's like, he's not here anymore. Apparently, he never went to class. He went to Magic class, and that was it. And
teaches you arithmetic, so there's some math involved. But yeah, I'm surprised none of us, me and my friends, ever failed, because we definitely played a lot. Once we really got into it, we were playing so often.
All right, so from one game to another, we've talked about a whole bunch of other games, but now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, into the fantasy football aspect of it. So speaking of fantasy football, Kyle, what is your preferred league format?
So my preferred league format is a salary cap contract league.
Somehow I had to guess that was going to be the answer.
I think everyone should know that by now.
Tell us more.
So the idea is it's the people who created the format attempted to create as similar of an experience to being an NFL GM as possible. So like the NFL GMs, they have the salary cap. They have to fit all the contracts for their entire roster under that cap. And it's the game of, man, you want good players, you've got to pay them. But how much can you pay them while still rostering as good a team around you as possible? So again, it's the game of fantasy football roster construction with the contract aspect, just a whole other element to try and evaluate. So I know the people who tend to like the format the most like it because they feel like it's the closest thing they can actually be to being an NFL GM. That's what I've heard most people say is like the appeal of the format.
Love it.
The reason it's my favorite is I love auction drafts. And the salary cap contract format necessitates that you have an auction every single year because not every player is under contract. So when you get to the end of a season, we play with expiring contracts, players that were already free agents. Any rookies that don't make it through the rookie draft become free agents as well. So every year you're going to have not every player, which is also a fun part of it. Like some players are under contract long term. you have other players who are available. So every year, in addition to a rookie draft, you'll also do an auction draft. Because I've been in some like a dynasty league where, okay, it's an auction startup. You do that a great auction the first year, and then it's just a dynasty team. Then everything you did in the auction, I mean, to get the players, like obviously there's consequences. You have those players, but like, okay, the money you spent on those players, that doesn't carry over. They're just, okay, the auction happened, and now it's just a dynasty league. Whereas the salary cap contract format, like those contracts are always present. That cap number is always important, and so it's become my favorite format of fantasy football.
Yeah, those are interesting. I've always wanted to get into one, but with me being in like 25 dynasty leagues, I just don't think I could do the math and handle all that.
Okay, I was gonna say if I do make one next year, Jamie, I'll invite you in.
I think you should invite him, because I gotta tell you, I listened to. What were you gonna say?
Like, does it take like that much more time and math in your head to figure these things out?
Well, see, Kyle's a good guy, because Kyle's going to help you out. And I'm going to tell you how I know this, because I just listened to the PLP, the Personal League podcast for the Combust League, which was a salary cap league. And Kyle and Brian Ford were in there giving their descriptions. And the level of depth and the angles that Kyle was analyzing these teams from, it was amazing to listen to. So, I mean, it was like Kyle was coming at things from like 4 angles at once. He was looking at the salaries. He's looking at how many years do they have left? How much money do they have left on their salary cap? What's their roster construction? How many picks do they have? Like all sorts of machinations were going on. He's really getting in depth with it. So if anybody out there wants help with their salary contract leagues, like Kyle is the person to ask for sure. But it was just amazing to listen to. Like, I have a full-time job, so I'm not going to ever be able to get into one, maybe until I retire. But it certainly was entertaining to listen to.
So I would say, Jamie, like the first auction is probably going to be the most difficult. Like, have you ever done an auction draft at all?
Oh yeah, no, I love auction drafts. Just never got into the salary part.
So I guess for the complex addition to that is just when you're, and I guess it depends, because I've also seen some forms of salary cap contract leagues where you do the auction, and then after the auction you assign how many years you want each player. But I've been in some auctions where you have a limited number. You have like 1 4-year contract, a couple of 3-year contracts, maybe 3 or 4 2-year contracts. And like, that's all you have to work with on multi-years. So as you're winning players, like that's where you're deciding, okay, which one am I using? So like, I would say the first time you do an auction, you've got that added level of just the years aspect. But overall, it would, whatever process you would use to go into a normal auction draft anyway, you stick to that. And I mean, from there, it's just knowing that, like, does the site track everything? Like, are you on Reality Sports Online where everything's automated, all the contract information is there? Or is it, okay, the league's on Sleeper, but the commish has a Google Doc or a Google spreadsheet, and like that's where all the contract information is. It's just being aware of it and understanding that, yeah, you have to keep your roster compliant under the cap. So it doesn't, I don't find it takes, like in my week to week, I don't necessarily spend more time on that one in season than I would others. You might spend more time on those leagues in the off season, just because, okay, I'm not just looking at the players. I'm looking at, like, it might take a little longer to find a trade, or like you're negotiating with someone and they're, okay, it's not as simple as I'll give you this pick for this player. Oh, but that's too much salary, so I've got to give you one back. So there's a little bit things that make it just slightly more complicated. But overall, I don't find I spend more time on that one in season than I do on other things.
So as Brian mentioned in the chat, is there different levels of like a beginner league? Is there expert?
Not really. There, to be fair, I don't think there's enough. And like the sites that like, because like, okay, like something like Underdog, right? Like you can have limits. Like, okay, like this is a beginners only league. Like I know DraftKings used to do that too, where if you were a certain level, you weren't eligible into certain leagues because it was too advanced. Like, unfortunately, like Reality Sports Online has their platform, but it's not popular enough that they've got enough people differentiating. So the truth is, the best way to get a beginner league, Jamie, is to find 11 or 9 other people. Because even like I find with those leagues, like it is better to have less managers if you feel like, okay, we'll only, like the one league I've been in since 2015, it's just a 10-team league, and the fear of expanding is it's harder to refill if we ever get to 12 and we lose somebody, it's harder to fill those. So we're sticking to just 10. But like if you got 9 other people that had never played, that's probably the best way to have a beginner league because then everyone's a beginner.
Interesting. So we got your preferred league format. What's
20-minute explanation on salary cap contract?
I love it though. Kyle's explaining all this, and then you have me, Jamie, and Brian are like, it's like the analogy is like, so Kyle, I'm interested in neurosurgery. Is there any way that I can get like an on-ramp into that? Is there an easy like beginner neurosurgery course that I could take? And Kyle's like, no, you
take a bio 101 at university. I guess start from there.
You do or you don't. But it sounds fascinating. Anyway, sorry, Jane, I interrupted you guys.
Yeah, no, I mean that does sound interesting, man. I need to look more into those. Try to get into one. But yeah, besides the format, what's one rule that you have to have in every one of your fantasy leagues?
It's funny because it's almost the opposite. It's the absence of something. No trade vetoes. Let's not have this. The rest of the league determines how I'm running my team. If 2 managers decide to make a trade, that's the only thing you need is the other manager approving, that other manager clicking accept. That's the only thing that should be needed for a trade. Like, we're all adults. Actually, not even going to say that because there are children who play fantasy football. And as a teacher,
we know because they're all in Jamie's league approving all these lopsided trades that he does. Sorry, Jamie, had to get that one in there.
Yeah, I don't do trade vetoes. That's their fault for sending me dumb trades.
Like, hey, look,
I know exactly.
Whatever, I dig the hole. If they want to fall into it, it's not my fault.
I planted a bunch of rakes around. If they want to walk into it and smack themselves in the face, that's their fault. We're having a sideshow here, but back on target. I just, I guess I will say as someone who teaches youth, people underestimate like the maturity of children at times. Like they're a lot smarter than we give them credit for. So I don't even want to say, oh, we're all adults here, we can all make trades, because even children can like manage a fantasy team properly, and like you can let them, part of the whether you're buying into a league or if it's free. Part of giving someone a team is they can manage it however they want to. So let people manage their teams. No trade veto. And honestly, my least favorite part of it is the fact that you have a time delay for people to vote. So I click accept on a trade and I still have to wait, 48 hours for me to actually get that player. In the off season, not so bad, but in season, like if I want to make a trade Saturday night, you're telling me I can't play that player on Sunday the next day because we got to have the 48 hour. That's the part that really ticks me off, because it basically gets to, if I didn't make the trade by 1 p.m. Eastern on Friday, there's no point making the trade. So I find trade vetoes in that sense actually discourage league activity, and like no rule should ever do that. You should be going the opposite. It's like NFL rules. Like I was listening to a podcast today with Dwayne McFarland. Every rule that the NFL makes is to score more points. They can talk about safety all they want. They can talk about this and that, but every rule the NFL's made since since 2011 with that whole lockout year, every rule they've made is what makes more points. So this whole new kickoff rule was talked about as if not enough points come from it, they'll just go back to the old kickoff. But if points are increasing because of the new kickoff rules, then they're sticking with it. So they'll try it for 1 year and they'll see it does it help scoring go up or not. Yeah, this is the opposite. Like fantasy football rules should be like that. You should always gear towards what creates more league activity, what makes more decisions for managers. And I just find trade vetoes are awful, so get rid of them. Or just don't have leagues with trade vetoes.
Yeah, like if I see a league has a trade veto, I won't even join it. I'm pretty sure when you interviewed me, that was one of mine also. So I 100% agree with you.
What a great way to kick off the season, Jamie. Perfect.
Yeah.
Wait, when you interviewed him for the Full Press Fantasy League, was there an actual interview process?
Did I interview you and you joined, Doc?
What? Oh man,
I might have.
All right. Well, I regret asking that question, and I'm sure Kyle has some regrets. One of the regrets might be being in a league with a trade veto. But other than that, what is your biggest fantasy football regret? This can be anything you want. It could be micro as putting a player in your lineup, or it could be as macro as anything.
Well, it's funny because it's micro and macro. It's a specific thing, but it also talks to a larger strategy. And honestly, Doc, that was a beautiful transition. No regrets at all with how you transitioned us there.
I learned from the master.
Man, one of the worst trades I ever made was like my second year in fantasy, 2013. It was a super flex league, and I was struggling at quarterback. I had gone early, and then I took Joe Flacco, who was not so elite with the Ravens at that point. as like a mid-round quarterback for my QB2, and I regretted it. It's like, man, I needed to. I shouldn't have waited that long for the QB2. Like Flacco was not cutting it at all that year. So I gave up like, honestly, I think it was like Jamal Charles and AJ Green to go get Aaron Rodgers. There was other players involved, but if anyone remembers 2013, how Jamal Charles ended that season, he ended as the RB1, and the manager I traded him to had LaShawn McCoy, who was the RB2. So I essentially handed them the title that year. And
is that Achille Olanga by any chance?
Literally the week after I traded, or maybe 2 weeks after, Rodgers broke his collarbone and missed the rest of the fantasy football. The Packers still made the playoffs, and they still won a playoff game somehow. Thank you, Randall Cobb, for coming back and beating the Bears week 17.
Oh my God.
But yeah, that was thank you, Matt Flynn, for keeping the Packers afloat to get Rodgers there. But yeah, that was bad. Man. But it's not my biggest regret, because my biggest regret was like that my team that year wasn't that great. Like I wasn't going to maximize Jamal Charles to winning me a title, but by trading him away, I essentially gave someone else the title. So that really sucks. It's like, man, that feels like almost worse. But
was that the person you traded him to? Was that Achille Olanga?
No, it's someone else in a league with Achille and I. Though.
Okay, all right. It took a shot, but okay.
That was just before Achille and I started playing fantasy together. I think he and I started playing fantasy leagues together in 2015. So that would have been just a couple years before that. But no, my biggest regret actually comes from a salary cap contract league, funny enough. I think it was 2021. And it's funny, this league actually only ended up lasting for 2 years. But both of the 2 years, it was the same two teams that we met in the final. Now, miraculously, maybe not miraculously, I won the second year. So at least I ended as my reign as league champion of that league. But that first year, I lost in the final, and now I can't remember who it was. Chargers running back Justin Jackson. This was a league where it's weird because our championship game was like week 15 instead of week 16, whatever it was. It was like the typical semifinal. But anyway, most people know that as the week where they picked up Justin Jackson. He got like 30 points. I think it was against the Texans or something. And I had the chance to pick him up, and I totally could have. But it was like, no, I prefer these other guys. I'm not really going to play this running back, so let me just go get a random wide receiver. Like, I didn't need him in my lineup. My opponent picked him up. So what I could have done is picked him up so my opponent couldn't have him and use him against me, because they beat me by maybe it was like 15, 20 points. And like that was, again, like Justin Jackson had like 30. So like if they didn't have that miraculous waiver wire pickup that got them 30 points in their lineup, I'm the only champion in that league's history going back to back. So
oh my God.
Like that's instead, like Mark is the name of the other guy. Like he and I, we both basically own that league. Like, man, both years we were the 1 and 2 seeds, got the first round buys both years, won both semifinals both years. Like it was just him and I in the finals both seasons. But instead of saying I got both championships, I got to split it with him. We're like the co-dominant team. So it's my biggest regret, because that really could have put a stamp on me being like, I'm the best. Salary cap contract format, I got this. It was like my first Dynasty IDP league. Didn't matter. I'm the salary cap contract guy, man. Instead, I mean, I did pretty good, but it could have been better. And I think that's my biggest fantasy regret. It's just that one simple thing. Sometimes, like, be active, and I was active. I was looking. I thought about picking up Justin Jefferson, and I ultimately said, I don't need him. But, someone else might have needed him. So that's one way you can play defense in fantasy football, is by picking up players and not letting your opponents get them.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it's just a little thing like that, like not picking up Justin Jackson, that makes
it's amazing how a whole season can come down to just one pickup, one player, all the hours, all the months, all the research, I was the 1 seed. I think I lost like 2 or 3 games all year. It's funny. I was the 1 seed when I lost the final, and then the next year he went on a tear. I think he lost like 1 game in the regular season. But I beat him in the final. So it's funny that like the 1 seed both years ended up losing. There's kind of the funny thing that made it sort of a mirror image of itself. He ran into the juggernaut that was Kyle Senra, who's out for blood, who's out for revenge.
I cannot lose this 2 years in a row, man. I have to. I'm picking up Justin Jackson did. Actually, you know what? I think picking up Zay Jones actually helped that year. Me winning. Zay Jones, the target monster with the Jaguars before they got Calvin Ridley.
I want somebody to clip that, Jeff. When you go back and listen to this, clip it. The sentence was, I picked up Zay Jones and he really helped me that year. I think that may be the first time in fantasy history that anybody has ever uttered that sentence.
He had that 100 target season with the Raiders.
Put that down somewhere. It's a first here on press coverage that anybody has ever said that, and it'll probably be the last.
League winners, A. Jones.
Yeah. So hey, Kyle, we all have truther players, right? Someone that you always want to just keep drafting over and over again. So what's one player that you do not want to leave drafts without this year?
It's funny because I've done 3 redraft leagues and I have Antonio Gibson in all 3. Wasn't necessarily the intent, but the thinking there is that like it might be more of a 50-50 split than we're admitting. And if it is, I think Gibson's going to such a huge value because I think he should be viewed as one of the best backup running backs, and he's a lot of other backups.
That's my truther. That's the guy I'm not leaving a draft with.
Who? Roshan?
No, Blake Corum.
Blake Corum. Oh yeah.
Good Roshan Cole.
No, like those like Corum, Chase Brown.
Roshan,
you consider Tajee Spears the backup. Like those are the good backups to have, I think. Yeah, for sure. But
Gibson had a huge rookie year. So
second year too. Like those first 2 years, they gave him a ton of carries and he had some touchdown upside to him. He still can catch a lot of passes, so he might have more of a role than we think he does.
The team's going to be playing from behind, so I could see him throwing the ball more.
He's on the Patriots, so it's like it's not someone I want to draft, but I've just happened to leave draft lists. But the guy I'm like really targeting, and so it's because Gibson be the guy you're able to target late, but the guy I want early, and I'm just maybe willing to take him earlier than usual, is Devon Achane. He's RB5 in my redraft rankings. In single quarterback, I view him as a first rounder. Yet you're not having to spend a first round pick.
Yeah, you can get him late second.
Not always. I spent the 201 on him in a recent redraft, but because it was like upstate 114, there's no way he's getting back to the end of the third. In Paulie's playoffs, shout out to Shane Barrett, who's also a member of the Going for Two Live family, charity league Paulie's playoffs. I got him. It's a super flex league. I got him in the 3rd round, and it was I think early 3rd. Still, so I've been, I love the upside of Achane. I think he has, I think, just as much touchdown upside as anyone not named Christian McCaffrey. So,
and he's so efficient. Plus, in that offense, he fits perfectly.
Can split touches and not be the true workhorse.
45%.
I think Raheem Mostert has a role, and Dan will yell at me for this because he's like, "Oh, he's the RB2 last year, and he's going as the RB 29. Why don't you go crazy with Devon Achane?" Yeah, cucks and whatever he was saying in that video. It's a great rant.
Great impression.
that was a solid Dan impression.
Yeah, I thought you were Dan for a second there.
He's like, we watched that one a couple times because it was so fun to watch him rip on Devon Achane, but yet he's a guy I'd really want to target because I do think Mostert isn't going to score 22 touchdowns again. I think he's also going to be worth drafting, but I'm just I think Achane's going to be the guy this year.
Brian, thanks for watching. Have a good meeting. All right, so we got Achane early. We got Antonio Gibson late. You don't have to convince me. He was my second round pick in our startup draft for the Full Press Fantasy Pod League.
Mine was Nick Chubb, and at this point, I don't know. I might almost rather have it.
That was back in 2021. I'm still waiting for those shares to pay off, baby. But who is it that you absolutely positively is on your do not draft list? You don't want him at any price this year. Doesn't matter. Last round, you're still not taking him.
The answer is almost Nick Chubb, but
what is it, Kyren Williams?
Yeah, Kyren. So Jamie and I are opposed on the thought that, I still think Kyren Williams is the lead back for the Rams. Jamie tends to think it's going to be Corum that takes over sooner rather than later. But even if I think Kyron's the lead back, I tend to agree with you, Jamie, that he's going too early in redraft. But I think if he goes late enough, I want Kyron. I'm interested.
I'll take him in 4th round. It's just I'm not getting him there because he's going.
No, he's still going in the 2nd round, 3rd maybe. But
no, I want the guy, Kyle. You're like, I'm not touching this guy. I don't want him.
Because I'm rarely ever the guy that says absolutely no to any player. Like if he's cheap enough, I'll take him. But
That's
there's one guy this
Everybody's
year
got a price, but every once in a while somebody comes along and you're like, doesn't matter. I don't want him.
So that saying, don't hate the player, hate the ADP. Just throw that out the window and I don't want this guy.
Well, and it's because of the way I build rosters and want to manage rosters. And I think especially this is a pick purely for redraft because I think he's actually a good buy in Dynasty. But in redraft leagues, I want absolutely no part of TJ Hawkins. So when I view redraft leagues, I'm thinking, man, the benches are shallow, especially we're all used to Dynasty leagues with 30-man plus rosters sometimes. Redraft benches are usually 5 or 6 players. And like one of my strategies in redraft is I want one tight end. If I'm drafting an elite guy, perfect. I have one bye week to worry about, and like that's in season. I can worry about that during the season. There's way more information. Even if they have the earliest possible bye, which is I think week 4, that gives me 3 weeks of information to gather and decide who's that player I'm going to pick for that bye week. I don't need to decide that right now when no games have been played. So I'm either doing that, or if I'm waiting late, I want one guy that I don't want to feel attached to. I can pick him. I can draft him. If week 1 he's not getting targets and someone on the waiver is, I'm going to drop him for that dude on the waiver that's getting targets. I'm just going to keep flipping. Either way I go with that strategy, TJ Hawkinson does not fit because he would in theory be an elite points per game guy, which is great. Like, okay, if you want him like you want an Evan Ingram because he's going to get targets, you think the targets equal out, so you just play him every week. The problem is you can't play Hawkinson every week if he's hurt. And with his very late season ACL tear, like I think it was week 18 or maybe at the end of week 17. So we're talking, I think, January, and it might have even been early February by the time he got surgery. So at what point is he returning and what shape is he going to be when he returns? Either way, I don't want to be holding an extra tight end on my roster when I need those bench spots to be picking up guys and be really active on the waivers. So tight end's a position where I don't really want to have 2 guys at all. So Hawkinson doesn't really fit the strategy. Like a guy with Nick Chubb, okay, if I draft enough running backs, I'm willing to hold that one running back spot for Chubb because he has upside. Like I can get those arguments. But yeah, DJ Hawkinson is someone that I have zero interest in redraft.
Yeah, that's a great call. I mean, if he comes back week 10, it'll take him a week or 2 to just get acclimated. Plus, he's got a pretty bad quarterback. I mean, by the time
for now, I mean, they could still trade for someone. I mean, look at they traded midseason for Josh Dobbs last year. They could trade midseason for Josh Dobbs this year.
But yeah, I was just gonna say, but by the time he's usable, like you're gonna know you're either out of the playoffs or getting into the playoffs, and he might not even hit your lineup until the actual playoffs.
He might benefit someone in the fantasy playoffs. I'm willing to take that risk that doesn't come back to burn me. And it might. This might be a whole new Justin Jackson, but no one's ever compared DJ Hawkinson to Justin Jackson before, but you heard it here first.
Jeff, clip that one too.
Oh,
the AI will find it.
So, Kyle, let's get into your all-time fantasy players. Who's your all-time fantasy QB?
Okay, so yeah, the one thing I will say, I want to do running back and tight end together because the reasoning is actually super similar. But yeah, we'll start with QB for now. This one is tough. I'm ultimately leaning for most of these guys on who like for fantasy football, the whole point is winning championships. So who are the players I've won championships with? That's where my brain went to at first. Now my thought was, man, as much as I've had some bad memories with Aaron Rodgers as a fantasy quarterback, like giving up way too much to trade for him only to get hurt. I've also had some good seasons where I've drafted Rodgers and it's like, okay, man, he's done it. But I don't think I've ever won a fantasy football championship with Aaron Rodgers, which is almost what the Packers say. Like they won only one Super Bowl with him. Like most of the time he wasn't winning a championship. So the quarterback that I actually want to go with is Dak Prescott. And I take a bit of pride in this because his 2019 season, which is Lamar Jackson's MVP season, they were both going in a range where I was advocating drafting them heavily. That year in 2019, they were going at QB 15, 16. But I had both in this like massive tier where like they were QB 10 and 11 or 11 and 12 for me. And a lot of those other guys going ahead of him, like that was a year where the hype on Baker Mayfield was just wild coming off his rookie season. Mitch Trubisky, man, like he was the real deal for the Bears. Like these are guys that were going ahead of Lamar and Dak that year. So I ended up both in Dynasty and Redraft getting so much of them, especially Dak in Dynasty. And that's kind of continued to this day where right now he's still one of my most rostered Dynasty quarterbacks at this point. So yeah, Dak Prescott has helped me win championships before, and hopefully continues to do so in the future as early as this. I mean, heck, last year I won a championship with Dak because he finished it's not his first time finishing as a top 5 QB either. I think.
Yeah, no, I've been drafting Dak a lot this year. He's going QB 8, 9, somewhere around even 10, 11. I just think he's a value. He can be top 5. So I love that call.
Yeah, so keep it going, Kyle. So you said you wanted to do 2 of them together. So go ahead, roll right into that.
All right. So as much as I've won a lot with Dak, the two players I've won the most fantasy football championships with are these two players. And I think one would be expected. Like if I said this is my fantasy RB1, everyone would be like, yes, absolutely, of course. Especially in modern day NFL, he's like a true difference maker. The tight end, though, if I were to say this tight end, it's not probably the answer most people would expect. So do you want me to bore you or surprise you to start, Doc?
I don't think you're gonna do. You're gonna surprise me. I don't think you're gonna bore me either way. But your choice.
The fantasy running back is Christian McCaffrey.
Okay, all right.
I mean, what when he's at his peak, he's just so much better than everyone else. It's a true difference maker at a position where difference makers are starting to become a thing of the past. He's still holding on. He gets all the valuable touches. He's on a great offense, but even when he was on the Panthers on a really bad offense, he was still getting all the goal line stuff, tons of touchdown upside, breaking records for receptions, so PPR points. McCaffrey's just a do-it-all boss. A couple of injury-plagued seasons have hurt his stock in certain years, but when he's out there, he's the best producing running back. So,
no, I love it, and I love the fact that especially as a non-ageist fantasy football player, the people that were saying 2 years ago to sell him low because he was approaching the age cliff or whatever, and he just turned around and rolled out the RB2 and RB1 overall seasons. After that, it's just music to my ears. So tell us about this elusive tight end.
Mark Andrews. And up until winning a title with McCaffrey last year, Mark Andrews was the player I had won the most fantasy football championships.
I could see that, though. Like, Mark Andrews is, I remember years ago, you were on a show with Scott Connor, and you were advocating at the time when it was not super popular to kind of sell your shares of like kind of the elite tight ends and get back Mark Andrew plus. And not a lot of people were saying
Kittle, sell Kelsey for Mark Andrews.
Yeah. And that was the year that Mark Andrews basically broke the tight end position. I think it was the time that he knocked Kelsey out of the tight. He was tight end one for the last 5 years or something, and then Mark Andrews finished as the tight end one. So
I think that was 2021.
Something that feels true. That feels right.
But here's what I was advocating for Mark Andrews is as far back as 2019. I remember that year, Lamar Jackson's breakout year. There were some things at the end of Lamar Jackson's rookie season that showed me it seems like he's favoring Mark Andrews. It is the quality of targets he's giving over the middle makes it seem like if you're going to target any Lamar Jackson weapon, it's Mark Andrews. And man, 2019, it was so easy to stack that Lamar and Andrews. I definitely remember doing that in a league or two. And Lamar, that was his first MVP season. He had over 1,000 yards rushing. If you had him in fantasy, that was a real difference maker. Lamar alone, I think, won me 2 or 3 titles that year. And a couple of those teams also had Andrews on it, whether it was taking him late in the draft. There was a dynasty league. It's funny because I have Dak on that team too in the startup, but it's a tight end premium dynasty startup in 2019. And Mark Andrews went in the 13th round. Yeah. Even I was looking back at why did I even let him go that far? Right. And it's okay. He was coming off a rookie season. It was actually pretty good rookie season, but the total pass attempts for the team weren't great, and the touchdowns weren't there yet. But that 2019 Lamar exploded as a rusher, as a touchdown thrower, and ever since then, Mark Andrews has been I think every year he's finished as the top 6 tight end since then. I mean, I guess last year he missed enough games he wouldn't have, but in points per game
wise, he was easily in the top.
So 10. those two are the easiest answers because again, I've literally won the most fantasy football championships with McCaffrey and with Andrews.
All right, so we got Dak under center, we got CMC and the Christian McCaffrey in the backfield, we got Mark Andrews at tight end. So who's playing wide receiver for Kyle's all-time number 1 team?
Cooper Kupp, baby.
All right.
I remember drafting him as a rookie in the 3rd round, and it was this salary cap contract league Keely and I have been in since 2015. And I remember I had 2 3rd-round picks, and luckily I nailed the second 3rd-rounder, 310, where I took Cooper Kupp, because drafting Artavis Stewart wasn't so great of a decision in the 3rd round. But luckily I got the Cooper Kupp pick. So not only was it, huge value for a 3rd-rounder, but because it was salary cap contract league, that 4-year rookie contract was super cheap the entire length of it. So it was this thing that when I eventually did trade him, it was such a valuable commodity to trade away because people wanted it, not just for the points, but man, how cheap it was. You were adding these points. It's one of the best rookie draft picks I've ever made in my life. Maybe the best rookie draft pick I've ever made. Because he was an immediate producer. He had some monster seasons on that rookie contract. And then in 2021, in that CDFF salary cap contract league I was talking about, man, I mean, like he put up tight end wide receiver 1 overall numbers that year, and it was like 100 points higher than everyone else. I think, did he set a reception record? I think
he set. I think it was a yard. He set the yardage record, and he had well into double-digit touchdowns. He had over 100 receptions. He won the Triple Crown. I mean,
yeah, it was. He had like 18 touchdowns that year. It was
something ridiculous.
Everything you'd want for a fantasy wide receiver. Actually, I remember it helped me win the Friends of Reality, which is the All About Reality podcast. They had a lot of their former guests on this one league together, and there were some big people like Bob Lungs was in that league, Kyle Dvorak, Graham Barfield. So some huge people in that league, and I remember I finished last the first year. The RSO expert salary cap guy and all these big wigs, they kicked my butt. Came back that next year though, and Cooper Kupp, he was on my team the first year, and like what he did from one year to the next was just such a huge step forward. And I remember, I think I ended up winning the championships. I won all my playoff games. I think I started 4-4, and then like won every game the rest of the year from the regular season through the playoffs. And Cooper Kupp on that miracle stretch was definitely the team MVP for that. So one of the biggest wins of my career, just because of like, man, the names of the people in that league. And here I am. I proved that I know what I'm doing salary cap contract wise.
Oh, I don't think anybody could dispute that. All right, so we've been here for a little while. We're heading into the red zone. We're pushing up towards the end zone here. We're coming up to the high fives. So the first high five, your top 5 game day foods.
Yeah, so this would all be pretty quick with. I think I'll say number 5. It's chips and dip, or even just chips. Honestly, I don't even need dip, but I'm a big sucker for just having chips.
What kind of chips?
Yeah, what kind? We need details.
I will eat any kind of chip, man. I love potatoes, dude. I've never come across a fried potato chip that I have not enjoyed. Like, I will try any weird flavor of chip. Like I'm Canadian, so I love ketchup chips. I know that's not really a thing in America.
I can't eat those. I even tried to give them to my kids. My kid will just lick ketchup off the plate, but he won't eat the chips.
It's not real ketchup. I think that's the problem. And I'm not a big fan of ketchup, which I think is why I like ketchup chips. But no, it's funny. My wife wants plain chips because she usually wants them with dip, but any flavor, no, nothing. I will take any type of weird exotic chip flavor. So yeah, right. Chips or dip, maybe even just the dip. I'll eat that. I would say I'm a sucker for cookies, so I'm gonna put cookies on. No one ever puts cookies in game day food, but I'll mow down a box of cookies watching the game.
Let me see your beer belly.
Yeah, I'll walk enough, I hope, and curl enough, apparently.
That's right.
I guess now the actual foods. I would say
burgers. What kind of cookies? What's your favorite kind?
I'm a big fan of Oreos and Fudgios.
Yeah,
okay. Good choice.
Yeah. I'll say burgers. Wings is like, now we're getting to like real food, but to me, like the best game day food is pizza. Like, you could order several pizzas. Like it's a great food to be able to share with lots of people. And that's why I think of game day. It's you have people over. Like to me, pizza is the ultimate game day food.
All right, that's a pretty good spread. You could convince me to come watch a game at the Senra house if you're running everything from pizza, burgers, wings, chips, and then you got cookies too. I think that's a little something for everybody there.
And I already know your favorite topping, but let the audience know, what do you like to eat on your pizza?
My favorite topping.
And why is it black olives?
It's amazing. I love black olives.
Yeah, because you got me into black olives since our show.
Okay.
On every single pizza that I have.
Yeah, no, when a lot of pizza places, you can get whatever, whatever size, medium, large, 3 toppings is typically the thing, right? Or maybe it's only 2, but when it's 3 toppings, I usually get olives as 1, and then 1 or 2 meats, whether it's bacon or pepperoni. Sometimes both of them, like bacon, pepperoni, olives. Like that's to me a great combo. I am someone that will put pineapples on pizza. And
I do too.
Give me the balance of pineapple, olive, and like bacon. You get two incredibly salty toppings, and then like it's balanced with the sweet topping.
All right, we made it an hour and 10 minutes, guys. Now you lost me. Now I got to cut out. I can't do
Dr. Ferretti doesn't like a pineapple on the pizza.
We can't do the pineapple on the pizza. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but I can go without pineapple on pizza. Now, the one thing I will never do is onions on pizza. The PSA, folks, onions aren't a topping. I don't know why people are obsessed with putting onions on a burger, or like why every restaurant I go to, I have to ask for no onions on a burger. Like, why do I have to ask that? Like, who is the moron who thought that this was a thing that people should do to the point where it's standardized, where I have to actually ask to not do it? That's like going to a sporting goods store and saying, "Oh, as standard procedure for trying these running shoes, I got to kick you in the testicles." Like, would you like that as part of your service? Like, no, I clearly explicitly don't want that. Like, to me, like that's like having burgers as a standard topping on anything, pizza or onions. So.
Well, this is a bonus. We not only got Kyle's favorite foods, but now we know his least favorite food. For the North American Onion Growers Lobby. We'll be putting Kyle's home address in the comments, so you know where to send the pipe bombs.
Send a bunch of onions, onion bombs. That would be worse. And yeah, I agree with Julia. It is great to see Doc.
I don't even know where to go with that. So I gotta kick it over to Jamie now. Like that the onion slander is too much.
Sorry.
So
I'm making you cry.
you definitely.
So we all love watching football, obviously sports, all kind of sports. But in your spare time, what's your top 5 favorite TV shows you like to watch?
All right, so my 5 favorite TV shows ever. It's funny because I guess off the top of my head, I was thinking of just naming 5 dramas. But I think instead I'm going to actually throw in a comedy show. And I'll throw in my favorite comedy show ever, which is Letterkenny. I'll put that at number 5.
I love that show, dude.
It's amazing. And it's filmed here in Sudbury, which is also kind of a cool connection. It's created in Canada. Jared Kiso's from Ontario. No, it's Southern Ontario, but still Ontario nonetheless. He was a phenomenal actor. I love the way it's written. I've waited my entire life for a show to be written like that. All the use of alliterations and the puns and then like the quick execution of the speed that they're talking, and like there's so much about it where it's not overly flashy. You let the actors take over. I love shows that do that, where the director doesn't get too much in their way, cutting things and trying to be really cool editing. Just film the actors performing, and Letterkenny I think captures that well, in addition to a lot of the other stuff. So yeah, Letterkenny is 5. Number 4, I'll put Lost.
That's a great show.
The attention to detail in that show, from like what characters are wearing to how they film things, like the dialogue.
The characters are amazing.
Oh yeah, the for such a huge ensemble show, and this is where it felt like this is where it was popularized in like the 2004, when at that point it's okay. It's the lead actor. Who do you have as your lead actor for your show? That's what drives your whole show. And Lost was done without that, really. Matthew Fox seemed like he's like the first billing actor. Like, if you had to name a lead actor for Lost, you'd say it's him. But he doesn't carry the show on his own. He's a great character, Jack Shepherd. But like the entirety of the cast is what carries the show. Each character is so well developed through that and how they evolve. And there's so many, like, that's such a hard show to name my favorite character, because there's times where it's one person, the other times it's the other. So
one thing about that show, people don't understand that the island itself is its own character.
That is a good point. Yeah, it feels like it. It's like how the Millennium Falcon is technically a character, like the TARDIS is its own living entity in Doctor Who. Another great show, by the way. Kyle's top shows. You know what? I love Orphan Black. I wouldn't put it in my top 5 favorite ever, but it's a Canadian show. Love it. Tatiana Maslany, I gotta say, it's one of the greatest acting performances I've ever seen, because she plays a bunch of different clones of herself, but each clone is unique with their own personality, their own style, their own way of speaking, and she like nails it perfectly with each one. It's incredible. I know, she's the actor who plays She-Hulk. I know that show is not necessarily the most well received, but my goodness, Tatiana Maslany is an incredible actor. She is phenomenal, and Orphan Black is truly one of the greatest acting performances ever. But with that in mind, I got to say, one of the other greatest acting performances ever to me is Matthew McConaughey in True Detective. My goodness, that guy gets it. And so I would say my third favorite show ever is True Detective. And there's
you got to specify season 1 though. Otherwise, people are going to watch season 2 and they're going to get confused, and then they're going to send you more hate mail, and it's going to be really bad.
Season 2 isn't horrible. It doesn't feel like it's a very different tone from.
It's a very tough act to follow. That's the way that I looked at it.
I absolutely adore season 3, and I think Mashallah Ali, much like that, also one of the greatest acting performances ever. Because through that season 3, he's got to almost play 3 different versions of himself at 3 different ages, and at each of those points in his life, he has a very different personality, and he nails it with all 3 of those characterizations of the same character.
That's a great
the most recent one, season 4. They went from southern places like Louisiana, Arkansas. That's what the magic of those first seasons 1 and 3 is the environments too. Alaska for season 4, that was fantastic. So True Detective, again, attention to detail. I'm absolutely obsessed with season 1. But then we get to the top 2, and I think these are the 2 that I have a hard time saying which one's my favorite. I will go with the order of the sort of the more unique, less conventional answer for number 1. I'll put that. So my number 2 favorite show is Breaking Bad. And I think these are the 2 shows that truly, from start to finish, every single episode, 10 out of 10 with acting, directing, and writing. The 3 pillars of any visual medium, whether it's TV or movies. And every character's acting performance in Breaking Bad is amazing. Even the characters you hate them because they're acted so well. Like Marie, one of the most annoying characters ever in television show, from one of the most annoying human beings on the planet. That says something. She makes me despise her character so much. It's perfectly well acted, beautiful. Some of the shots they do, like some of the camera work, like that. The season 4 premiere, Gus Fring comes into the room, and he's in the room for a total of, I remember clocking it too. It was like 10. It was almost 10 minutes, like 9.5 minutes, without saying a word. But his presence is so strong that it says everything you need to, just having him in the room. And every other character is around him, panicking, over talking, and he doesn't have to say anything. He barely does anything, and yet his presence is so amazing. Just the way it's filmed and written for that, incredible. My favorite show ever is 19-2 or 19-2. There are actually 2 versions of the show that exist: a French version and an English version. And the reason is because it's a police show based in Montreal, and it's 2 partners in the 19th precinct, and they always drive the second car of the 19th precinct, hence 19-2. There are a lot of scenes filmed in the car, but there's also a lot of scenes that aren't in the car. The acting performances are incredible. Jamie, the English version, Jared Keeso plays Ben Chaltier, and that's Jared Keeso from Letterkenny. Phenomenal job. He gets, because in the original French version, it's Claude Legault, who's a very famous Quebec actor. Even Keeso's talked about that. Like, man, I'm playing the same role as Claude Legault. Like, I really had to work hard to nail it, and he certainly did. There's a sequence, the season 2 premiere. There's a shot. It's a single shot that takes 13 minutes as they're going through this building, through the school, different stages of it. Like, the shot allows you to kind of get the architecture of the place at the same time as showing all the drama and showing the characters. 13 minutes of just a straight shot. It was so impressive in the original French version that the director of the French show, which is actually another thing, and I'm almost done rewatching the French show. I've done it again this summer, once a year. It's actually one of the few shows where it's the same director from the first episode to the last episode. So few TV shows actually have that happen. There's a shared vision between several directors, but this is one director, one vision, the entire series, and it perfectly captures it. The season 2 premiere was the way it was shot was so incredible that they actually got him to direct that episode of the English version. Whereas the English version had multiple directors. They wanted his vision so much because they loved how he executed it that they brought him on for that second season premiere. So 19-2, in my opinion, the greatest TV show ever. And if you can stand watching with subtitles, the French version is on Netflix. I think it's well worth it, but not for the faint of heart. My God, this, like Breaking Bad, these 2 shows will mess with your emotions. Like, there's nothing that will make you feel more tension and more awfulness than this show. It's amazing. It's beautiful.
I actually have seen the episode that you're referencing for 19-2 with the school, and it was amazing. So really, really good call there for anybody that's not familiar with it. That can get into it. It's a really good call, and not really well known in America, I don't think. So that's short form. That's TV shows. Now we're gonna go into a little bit more long form, and you had Joe Pisapia on And for the people that don't know, Joe Pisapia with Fantasy Pros used to work in the movie industry. So we're going to take it there. We're going to take it to movies. So top 5 movies, Kyle.
So one of my favorite movies ever, I would say, is Pirates of the Caribbean, but only the first one. I felt that was one where they pushed that way too far. They captured something with that first movie. It was an action movie about pirates, zombie pirates, essentially. But like characterizations, like every character in that movie is great. Even the couple of silly villains, the glass eye that they always get in trouble, like even their characters are great. But like Johnny Depp, phenomenal performance. Orlando Bloom, amazing. Keira Knightley, like the dynamic of all three of those characters together was fantastic. Jeffrey Rush as Captain Barbossa in that first one, a perfect villain. But he's a villain that you like. All the great villains aren't just pure villains. There's empathy towards them. You can understand them to a certain extent, and you can even respect them. And I thought that was great. It was funny. It's a funny movie. There's so many clever, funny lines, and it really is a precursor to what we see in the as we go later into the 2000s. The fusion of you want so much comedy in your action movies. It's one of the first places it really starts. We see it a lot in superhero movies. That really starts with the first X-Men movie, though, which I would maybe consider up here, but no. Pirates of the Caribbean for me is one that, yeah, I just love it. It's an original concept. Yeah, it's based off an amusement park ride, but it's not like derived from a novel or anything. I guess that's where I'm going to go with the next one.
Now, let me ask you this: have you ever noticed that Jack Sparrow's hat is kind of a character? Because every time he loses his hat, he has bad luck. He gets arrested.
Huh.
Bad happens to him, but as soon as
he always gets it back at the end. Yeah.
You know what? Like everything goes perfect for him.
I'm going to next. Okay. You know what, Jamie? I'm going to rewatch Pirates of the Caribbean. I'm really going to pay attention to the hat. Number 4 is Inception. Christopher Nolan, I think, masterpiece. And he's made a lot of really good movies. I would argue this is his best. And again, it's not based off anything. This isn't a book adaptation. And unlike, say, Pirates of the Caribbean, they didn't oversaturate. They made one Inception movie, and that's it. This is a story. We're telling a story here. It's captured within this movie, and that's all you get. Visually, it was so impressive, though. Dreams, like, using your dreams as inspiration. You can see where Christopher Nolan got that inspiration from, and just magical. Leonardo DiCaprio, one of my favorite actors ever. So many great performances. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, phenomenal in that movie.
And for NBA Rigged in the chat, it was Captain Jack Sparrow, Johnny Depp for Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah. Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. This would have come out like 2003, 2004 maybe. And yeah, they made a bunch of sequels afterwards, but they never really recaptured what they had in the first one because it wasn't intended to be more than that. It was so successful that they're like, yeah, give us more money. Let's make more. But originally, like they had, when they made that movie, it was never planned to be a sequel afterwards. They just added sequels when it became so successful. And I love that Inception, they didn't mess with it. One, and there we go. Now, for my top 3, they're all movie trilogies specifically. And again, I guess The Matrix, which is my number 3, is kind of like that too. They made that first Matrix. They had no intention of ever making anything else, but eventually made 2 and 3. And I love the first one, the shock of it when you watch it for the first time, but the details. And, for 1999, that stuff looked really cool. It felt like they really took the next step when it came to CGI and what we see now as impressive visuals. But for 1999, man, The Matrix, that looked awesome.
Yeah. And have you seen
2003? Sorry?
Have you seen the 4th one? It came out recently.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
That explains a hell of a lot.
It does. Well, it's funny. Even though the 3rd one's called Revelations, it felt like Matrix Reloaded actually had a ton of revelations in it. So I really love the 2nd one.
And, the first. The same person that wrote The Matrix is the same person that wrote Terminator, and they said that she mentioned that it's all one movie. So the future of the Terminator is what The Matrix is.
Oh, machines taking over. That is true. Yeah, that would be the ultimate.
Is John Connor?
Wow, crazy. Now I got to watch those all together. So it's Captain Barbossa, played by Jeffrey Rush. By the way, Julia.
Thank you. I was just looking that up for.
So number 2 for movie trilogies is the original Star Wars trilogy, because we talk about like that's a testament to how much they created, how much they standardized, how ahead of his time Star Wars was in 1977, and how it basically took CGI in the late 90s, like 22 years later, something like The Matrix to finally look better and sound better than something that Star Wars did. But they set the industry standard on so much. They had so many patents because they were inventing so much to make this movie as good as it was. And then once it was so successful, again, like Dolby sound, that was something that was very rarely used in Hollywood. It was a European film thing, but then once Star Wars showed the capacity of Dolby, Hollywood standard across the board. No movie today will ever dream of not using Dolby sound. Skywalker sound, Industrial Light and Magic, like these companies most Hollywood companies are using them for their visuals and their sound today. So what they did, what George Lucas did, and what his crew did, phenomenal, impressive. But the number one movie trilogy for me is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I think Peter Jackson, set a standard for what filmmaking should be, acting, set making, costume making, all the details of filmmaking. I think they captured it perfectly in Lord of the Rings. With me being in the Legolas division this year, I've actually in the process of rewatching the Lord of the Rings trilogy again for the second time this year. I watched them with my friend earlier in the year, and then when I got in the Legolas division and started drafting, it's like, I started using the GIFs on Twitter for my pick thread. I'm like, I want to watch Lord of the Rings again. So if I have to watch it multiple times a year, I will, because I love that.
That's awesome. So we got to the movies. Some people like to actually read their stuff. So
I'm prepped. I'm ready.
Yeah. Well, what is your 5 favorite books, and is Lord of the Rings in there?
It's funny because I actually think I didn't put it. I was tempted to, but I actually think the movies improved it even. There were certain things the movie did differently from the book, and I actually think it almost made it better. Arwen is the one that rescues Frodo in the first movie after he gets stabbed, and she's the one who brings him to Rivendell to get healed. In the book, it's not Arwen. We don't need Arwen until we get to Rivendell. It's some other elf called Glorfindel. And it's like you're just kind of throwing this random character in and then never using him again. Like it really feels like having Arwen be the one that saves him really adds to her character. It adds to the whole story. Putting Shelob, like the spider, instead of it being in 2 towers, in the book they really stretch out how long it takes them to walk through Mordor and get to there's a lot of walking, but maybe that's a little too much. So they put Shelob in Return of the King, so they don't stretch out that side of the Frodo Sam story. So, for Peter Jackson having perfected it, I've actually taken off Lord of the Rings the books. But for number 5, I have a lot of, because I like music biographies and stories. But to me, David Grohl's Storyteller is probably my favorite because of everything he's done, all the great musicians he's worked with, from Kurt Cobain in Nirvana to Josh Homme and all the stuff they do with Queens of the Stone Age. Or heck, when he and Josh Homme were joined by John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin to create Them Crooked Vultures, like, and everything in between, all the stuff Dave Grohl's done with Foo Fighters, everyone he's come across, it's all in this book, and it's great. And yes, Julia knows exactly what's coming next, because number 4, this book does not suck. Injuries might suck, but your fantasy team doesn't have to.
That was in my top 5.
Yeah, for sure. It was. Yeah, Jamie definitely has it too. It's in my top 5, clearly. Because now we're getting to a few sports books. But, to talk about what injuries are and to how, have all this, and I think you say this in the book, Doc, what's the best way to get all this information? You could, go to school for 10 years and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars getting a medical degree, or you could buy this 100-page book and have Doc explain everything you need to know. Thank you, Doc, so much. It's great. And again, I think it's chapter 8, the chapter on how you budget for injuries with your auction plan, and having a kind of like a round by round analysis in terms of like, okay, if you're going to discount an injured player for this many rounds, you then, this many rounds into it, you'll get his handcuff or a backup plan for them, and like how you're, how to take advantage of essentially of injury discounts and when it's appropriate to go on them. And it's this whole strategy thing. And again, this book, is it 100 pages? It's not even 100 pages, honestly. 90. Oh, exactly 100. The About the Author with the great picture of Doc is page 100 exactly. So it's a 100-page book. Well worth it, folks. Get it on Amazon from our very own Dr. James Ferretti.
You are very kind. Thank you.
Well, right after Ferretti is Lombardi. Run to Daylight.
Alphabetically, that is true.
Yes. But yeah, Doc, you're right behind Vince Lombardi. I don't know if that's a high praise, but Run to Daylight, a book by Vince Lombardi. He co-wrote it with a journalist who essentially followed him for a season, but especially this book is centered on 1 week. It's a week's game preparation for the Detroit Lions. And the Lions had beat the Packers earlier in that year, so it was kind of like this revenge game. I believe it's from the 62 season, which is often considered the greatest season in Packers history, because they ultimately did go and win the NFL championship that year. One of it's their highest points differential ever. That team dominated, but they still lost the Lions that year, so they had to get revenge against them. And it's the week leading up to it, every step of the way. And there's so much like football knowledge that goes into why practices are done and how you design offenses. And like, it follows him for a week, but it tangents to so many different places. And even when it's following the game, it's talking about how well Lombardi prepared Bart Starr, because it's getting like Lombardi's, before, headsets and play calling, your quarterback just had to memorize the whole game plan and execute it. You could talk him between drives, but there was no microphone in the helmet. There was no offensive play caller telling the quarterback what the play was. He just had to know what play to go with and go with it. And so often you're seeing Lombardi think, yes, Bart went to the right play. Like even as an offensive coordinator, you could be a genius. Oh, does my quarterback actually go to the right play when he needs to? And like how well he prep his quarterback to do so. That he would, okay, this is the play you should run to, and he would do it. And it's like, man, that's detail. Having to really teach your players that instead of, oh yeah, don't worry, the whole playbook, I'll tell you what plays to call now. It's a little easier for quarterbacks. Number 2, Doc, I'm pretty sure you've read this based on my recommendation, because I talked about it and then you went and read it afterwards. Finding Murph by Rick Westhead. And I got to say, Rick Westhead might be the best investigative journalist in sports, period. Like, so John Murphy, former first overall pick in the NHL draft in the 80s, but suffered a lot of concussions and he abused a lot of drugs to the point where it really messed up his life. And this happened. He was originally doing just this book wasn't intended to be a book. It was supposed to just be like a news reporting, like a 20-minute segment for CTV. There was a former NHL player that had found out that Joe Murphy was living in Kenora, Ontario, far, North Ontario, kind of an isolated place, and he was living homeless on the street. And so this player went with Rick Westhead to Kenora to talk to him. And Rick started uncovering a bit about Joe Murphy's story, and then he kept researching to the point where he ended up making a book about it. And it's about Joe Murphy, so it works as a biography, but it also talks about concussions in sports, the history behind it, how long people have actually been studying. Like, studies about concussions in sports have dated to like the 1920s. So this is stuff that's been around, but not being reported as much and not available for athletes. So it's talking about how that's changing, how the research is coming out, and we're finding out more about concussions through the book, and Rick's finding out about Joe and finding about concussions. So it's like both together. So it's a topic of a one particular athlete, but with an issue that affects so many people in and outside of sports. And I just think it's so well done. Rick Westhead, he's done so many things, like the recent Chicago Blackhawks scandal for them covering up a sexual assault of one of their players by one of their video coaches. He did not let that go. As soon as there was like some hint of that could be true and the lawsuits came out, he's the guy that kept reporting on it. And ultimately, he's the one that got Kyle Beach to publicly state his name and then do it. Like they did a 20-minute interview segment. And if anyone can watch that, Rick Westhead with Kyle Beach, it's a very powerful interview. It's tough to listen to because the details are, we're talking about sexual assault. So it's very serious. And you really feel for the guy, but like Kyle Beach wouldn't have been willing to come out if it wasn't for someone like Rick that was clearly in it to tell the truth. This wasn't Rick trying to make himself better. He wanted to use his platform to get these stories out. I think one of the best investigative journalists, period, in the world, but certainly we're lucky in the sports world that he's chosen to focus so much of his attention on sports, because we've uncovered a lot about sports stories because of Rick Westhead. But we'll end with a positive. The Film Club by David Gilmour. And this will actually transition to the next point. David Gilmour, guitarist of Pink Floyd, one of my favorite bands, one of my favorite guitar players. This was in a music store. So, you can forgive me for thinking it's spelt the same way, because I've seen Gilmour spelled a bunch of different ways. David Gilmour, written that same way, The Film Club. And I know, okay, he is into movies a little bit. So I actually thought it was a David Gilmour novel. So I bought it. Sure enough, after reading it, this has nothing to do with David Gilmour from Pink Floyd. David Gilmour is actually a film critic, Canadian film critic. And it's a story about his son wanting to drop out of high school. And while he resisted, the father, David Gilmour, eventually agreed. But he said, okay, if you're going to do this, you and I'm going to create a list of movies. I'm going to give you an education through what he knows, which is films. And again, paid as a film critic, whether it's through newspapers, television. That's how he was making his career. And so his career was watching movies. So he and his son essentially watched a bunch of movies together for years, throughout what would have been 2 or 3 years. And almost every day watching a movie, but certainly like 3-4 times a week, really sitting down and looking through like the details of movies and things. I'm showing movies for specific purpose, and it goes through the movies. It tells you, like, I'm learning so much about these movies reading the book. For someone who likes movies as much as I do, I love it. As a teacher, from like an educational standpoint, it's great. The emotional ties of father and his son, like from that aspect, it's great too. I was not expecting this to be this book. I was not expecting to really like it, and it's probably the favorite book I've ever read. I haven't written one, but yeah, those are my favorite books. So yeah, called The Film Club, Julia.
So I want to address NBA Rigged real quick. This won't take long. She asks, on a side note, for me, if I don't mind, since I'm a Raiders fan, Las Vegas Raiders, how would I define a successful season for the Raiders this year after a rather inspiring end of the season last year? Well, it's real simple. If Mark Davis doesn't fire Antonio Pierce by the end of the year, they don't trade Devontae Adams for like a 6th-round pick, and they can manage somewhere between 7 and 9 wins, that's all I ask. Just do those 3 things, and I'll be happy. We don't need to get too crazy. Let's just keep an upward trajectory and not shoot ourselves in the foot again, and I'll be very happy with that. Now, I want to transition, Kyle. We're going to go a little bit out of order because I have one question for you. I don't know how long the answer is going to take because I want to save the last part for last, which is top 5 bands. So we'll get there. But what I want to ask you, and I think all the people out there want to know, especially somebody like myself, I'm busy. I'm a doctor. I just had a daughter. I have a 7-week-old daughter. But you, soccer, hockey, basketball, music, chess, bass, electric guitar, teaching, card collecting, all the fantasy pods, all the guest spots. You're married. You got to keep Mrs. Senra happy. How do you find the time? What is the secret? Tell us underachievers out there. How do you do it?
Oh boy. I would say, to me, if there's something I'm not interested in, I'm just not going to waste my time on it. So like everything I do because I enjoy it or because I need to as a part of my enjoyment for something else. So, sometimes the fantasy football research gets monotonous looking through a lot, but it's for the purpose of, okay, I want to better this, or I want to, increase stuff for my podcast or get better things there. But essentially, I enjoy doing everything I do. Like teaching's hard, but I certainly, you got to make it, make a living somehow. So of all the things it could be, I see myself, wanting to influence children, the next generation, look after them and just be there for them. And especially as a supply teacher, sometimes, be the interesting change of pace that, okay, maybe a student isn't hearing something that they should, or like not even about like what they're learning, but about themselves. So I've had some good experiences, even just as a supply teacher, getting through to students that if I'm just with them for one day, I can kind of find a connection, help them get positivity through themselves, show, focus on an aspect of themselves they don't necessarily focus on. So, man, I don't know. That was a lot of time to say something, but I guess, the big thing is just, not wasting time on the things I don't want to do. If I have no interest in something, I'm not even going to pretend to be interested.
All right. I love it. And I'm not going to be surprised if they're writing a book about you someday and we find out that you were actually made in a lab and you only required like 90 minutes of sleep a night and that's how you did it. But you don't have to disclose that. You don't have to disclose that here. So, Jamie, take us home.
Yeah. So I know that you are in a band. So what's your top 5 favorite bands?
Yeah. And so when I've asked this question to people on the show, I've said artist or bands, just in case, because some people might be solo artists, but for me, it happens to be that my top 5 favorite recording artists are all bands. So I thought it would just be simple. Sorry, solo artists, no room for you here. So the one thing I was going to do was also talk about my favorite band and my favorite album by each of those bands. And of the 5 bands I'm going to talk about, I've seen 4 of them live. So it also does make sense that the one I haven't seen live would be the one that comes in number 5, and it's Pink Floyd, with the aforementioned David Gilmour. Again, not the Canadian music critic David Gilmour, but British guitar tone extraordinaire David Gilmour. And it's funny because I've got 2 of my 5 bands are considered progressive rock bands from the formed in the 60s and the 70s, that sort of classic rock era, and then 3 of the bands are more modern rock. But man, Pink Floyd is timeless. It's classic.
Have you ever seen a Pink Floyd movie, The Wall?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Awesome.
I love The Wall. Great album too. I wouldn't say it's their best album because I'll get to that in a sec. But Pink Floyd, originally formed it was originally 4 of them. David Gilmour eventually replaced Sid Barrett as the guitarist. Roger Waters, the bass player, and eventually took over as the main lyricist of the band, especially during their successful era, which started with Dark Side of the Moon. That's the album that really, Time and Money were the two big singles off that album, and that's what really made them international superstars. Were big hits in America. I think Dark Side of the Moon is the album that spent the longest and most amount of weeks on the top 100 albums, and it's like decades later. I think into my lifetime, it was still like one of the in the top 100 of the album sales. So it just like clung on to a life of its own. Everyone wants Dark Side of the Moon. I think everyone recognizes the prism with the light going through as the album cover. Very simple concept. And that's what the album was. It talked about, again, time, money, breathe was one of the songs. Like some of the most simplistic things, but the song structures were long. My favorite album by them is actually Wish You Were Here, 1975. One of the key things is also the keyboardist Richard Wright. His jazz background, but also wanting to explore with different types of keyboards, and they were pretty ahead of their time with like using sequencers and things like that. But Wish You Were Here, it's only 5 songs. It's a full album of just 5 songs. You've got Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which is split into 9 different parts. I think it's like 12 minutes to start the record, and then another like 13 minutes to end the record. So it's like both like all 9 parts combined is like a 25-minute piece. There's Welcome to the Machine, Have a Cigar, which are about the music industry, but Shine On You Crazy Diamond and Wish You Were Here really are about the original band member, Sid Barrett. He did a lot of acid, but he was also schizophrenic, and those two things really don't mix. So he had multiple nervous breakdowns and just could not function in really society at all, but certainly in the band. So he was only on their first album, even though he was the main songwriter at first. So that was for them. It's like, okay, he was the genius who wrote See Emily Play and Arnold Lane, all the big hits off that the late 60s, that psychedelic era. And they went to, Animals. I love Animals. Of course, Brian would love Animals because it's basically like very George Orwell Animal Farm-esque. It's very much a comment on capitalism. So of course, Brian would love it.
I kind of feel bad because the New Jersey guy who should be asking you about music is definitely Brian Ford. It's not Dr. Jim, but I'm enjoying it nonetheless.
Yeah, it's okay. Sorry, Brian. I'm not going to talk about Fish tonight. But yeah, Wish You Were Here. The one thing about that, there's a motif at the start of Shine On You Crazy Diamond. David Gilmour plays on the guitar. And they use that in some way on each of the 5 songs throughout the album. And it's Wish You Were Here is the song itself is crazy because David Gilmour, these electric guitar tones, but that one's just an acoustic guitar. And his solo with that is actually incredible. The guitar riffs, Wish You Were Here, my favorite album by Pink Floyd. We'll move on, though. Number 4 favorite band is a band called Incubus. They're from California, I think they're formed in 1991. So they were literally formed the year I was born by Brandon Boyd as vocalist, Mike Enzinger on guitar, Jose Palace III on drums, and they're all 3 still in the band to this day. And then also Dirk Lance, Alex something, I can't remember his name, but he would go by Dirk Lance as the original bass player. Eventually, they got a turntablist starting with their second album and became a 5-piece. And they're very much a 90s alternate rock band. They kind of use a bit of metal, use a little bit of like really weird atmospheric stuff too. It's almost a progressive rock band. Brandon Boyd's one of the best singers I've ever seen. Got to see them live, and he was so impressive. My favorite album by them is called If Not Now When from 2012. And the title track is actually what Victoria and I used as our first dance at our wedding. And that song, incredible vocal performances. And when we saw them live, they actually played that one. And that's not like a hit single. So it wasn't necessarily given that they would, but for them to play our song live while we were there and seeing them, it's super awesome. So love Incubus. Mike Enzinger, one of my favorite guitarists ever. He, like David Gilmour, David Gilmour, the tone he has is just perfect. The tones that Mike Enzinger would come up with are strange and out there, and it's wild what he can do with the guitar. Not quite Tom Morello extreme, but like it's getting there. Number 3, Tool. So progressive metal band, again from the 90s. Yeah, Jamie loves Tool. Justin Chancellor is maybe my favorite bass player ever. Some of the bass lines he comes up with, some of the bass solos he has sound wild. They don't release a ton of albums. They've released one album in the last 18 years. Jeez, no, not that long. Yeah, I guess so. They 10,000 Days came out in 2006, and then they didn't release their follow up until 2019, Fear Inoculum. So quite a long time. But these are long, complex structures. The time signatures they use. There's a song Schism, which is pretty popular. That the time signature shifts so much in that song, it's ridiculous. For what is a charting, rock song, it's metallic space blues. That would be a good way to actually describe David Gilmour, metallic space blues. Much more on the metal side of Tool, but yeah, the long, complex structures. Their album 10,000 Days is my favorite. There's the song The Pot, which is about hypocrisy, like the kettle calling the pot black or the pot calling the kettle black, whatever it is. Justin Chancellor's opening bass line is really complex. It sounds super groovy for a heavy metal band. You don't think they'd play with that much like real funk on the bass line, but it does at the same time as being super heavy. It's crazy. Rosetta Stone is like a 13-minute song that just goes into all these different places, different riffs. Yeah, so 10,000 Days, what an album in 2006. My second favorite band's probably Muse. That's an impressive group. Matthew Bellamy, one of the most talented musicians ever. Phenomenal guitar player, phenomenal piano player, phenomenal vocalist, incredible songwriter. Their live performances, seeing them live, they had like dancers in exoskeleton suits, these like 10-foot tall suits that they would like as part of this band playing as part of their album Simulation Theory. They had this inflatable like 30-foot giant thing as part of their stage set too. It almost looked like a giant robot. Incredible how Matthew Bellamy, in addition to playing all those things, guitar, piano, and vocals, he arranges a lot of symphonic orchestra parts. There's the album Drones, and he literally writes like a madrigal, which is like Renaissance era style singing. So we're talking about like stuff from like the 1500s, and he kind of, using our modern language, kind of creates a song in that style that's just a vocal a cappella song at the same time as making this like super heavy metal song called The Reapers, which is all based on this awesome guitar riff, wicked solo. Like the album Drones, I think the different places they go to, the extremes that Matthew Bellamy and Dominic Howard and Chris, man, his last name is so long, I don't know how to pronounce the bass player's last name, but those guys, like the extremes they go to as a trio on that album Drones, which is from 2016, I think. Incredible. But my absolute favorite band ever is Yes. I actually got to see them live. Steve Howe, probably my favorite guitarist ever, because he fuses classical guitar playing with sort of rock blues styles. Chris Squire, very melodic bass player, used a lot of like effects on the bass, wah pedals and distortions and different sounds that in the 60s and 70s, not a lot of bass players were doing. And yeah, the progressive rock style, their album Fragile is my favorite rock album ever from 1971. And there's a bunch of like song, like the song Roundabout, Doc. I don't know if you know that one by Yes. That was kind of maybe one of their more popular ones off that album. So there's songs on the album where it's the whole band playing, but there's also each band has like a solo, or each member has like a solo song. Rick Wakeman, the keyboardist, he takes a Brahms symphony, it's symphony number 4, movement 3, and he reorchestrates it on a bunch of different keyboards and overdubs it. The singer John Anderson, his solo song was just basically like, I'm gonna sing this line, I'm gonna overdub it like several times, a la Bohemian Rhapsody, the orchestral section, a little bit before that, so ahead of his time. The bass player did something similar. I'm gonna create a bunch of weird bass tones, and I'm gonna harmonize over top and like overdub and kind of create that same feel. Instead of vocals, it's all just bass with the drummer playing. But then Steve Howe, he just did a solo classical piece that he composed, and it was like each member with their own solo piece got to envision what a solo piece was, and it was a totally different thing. So you have 5 individual musicians that are showcasing their individual talent, but they come together to make such incredible ensemble songs. So Fragile from 1971 by Yes is my favorite album ever. And wow, this was definitely one of our longest episodes ever, I think. So thanks, guys.
Well, I mean, you didn't mention Grateful Dead, Kyle, and this was a long, strange trip, but we got there. And we want to just say thank you to our audience. We appreciate you for hanging with us. We know you could be spending your time doing literally anything else, but you chose to spend your time with us here. We truly appreciate that. Otherwise, it would just be us talking to ourselves. Thank you to Brian And NBA Rigged for hanging and joining us in the chat. And Kyle, thanks for doing this.
And Brian is right. I do love Rush. But yeah,
wait, we're not
to
done.
make it to my top 5, but he's not wrong. I do absolutely love
it. Honorable mention for Rush. Brian, this really you should be sitting in this seat asking these questions. Kyle, thank you again for doing this. Thanks for letting me be a part of it. I hope everybody out there enjoyed learning more about their favorite host, Kyle Senra, as much as I did. So thanks for
going overboard, Doc. I know you wanted to get out of here by 9:30, but
hey, listen, I couldn't go. Once you got going on bands, it's like, yeah, I got to go to work. But I was like, I'll make it. The X-rays and the CAT scans aren't going anywhere. I want to hear this. So I mean, this really was a pleasure, and I'm honored and privileged to be a part of it. So thanks for letting me be a part of it, and thanks for everybody who stuck around this long to learn so many things about you. I mean, it really is, I think, going to be one of people's favorite episodes. Once they go back and listen to it, because you are very generous with your time, with your guests, and it's nice to be able to get an extended peek behind the curtain and learn more about one of the favorite hosts, not just for Going for Two, but I think in the fantasy football space. So thanks for doing this.
I also just realized my name was Jamie Perog the whole time. I just caught that. So now it's Kyle.
Well, the people know. They know the voice. They know the face. They know the music. They know who it is.
But honestly, thanks to both of you for suggesting this and encouraging me to do something like this and joining me for this. I'm happy to share everything and get to talk. This was awesome. So thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Doc. And thank you all the listeners. Jamie, do you want to say anything before we
I just want to thank the audience for joining us on this incredible journey as we deep dive into the incredible mind of Kyle Senra. Like, I love you, Kyle. You're amazing. You're one of my people in this whole world. So this final episode of press coverage has been nothing short of epic. It's going to go down as an epic episode, like leaving us with the insights that you left resonating in our head. And I just want to thank all of you for joining us. Like, we hope you've enjoyed it as much as we did. Doc, thank you. You're awesome. I'm glad you came on with us to do this. So until next time, keep the conversation going.
Yeah, well, thank you, Doc. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, all the listeners who have listened over 4 years to this great series. Thank you, Jeff Lambert, for giving us the platform here at Going for Two Live. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, like the video, comment. There's going to be lots of stuff in season. Again, Jamie, I'm looking forward to joining you on Sunday morning.
Yes, I can't wait. It's going to be a great time.
All right. Well, I mean, this was a great time tonight. Almost 2 hours, boys. Thanks so much. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Brian and Julia. Everyone else in the chat. There's another Kyle in the chat too. So
and there was a Jamie in the chat. I saw.
Yeah.
Who's that guy? Who's that guy pulling double duty?
That Canadian Jamie, right? However, wherever you're listening from, again, thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Doc. Thank you, all the viewers, listeners. I'm Kyle Senra, and this was the season 4 finale of Press Coverage.